I think the challenge to all of us, regardless of gender, is to say, are we walking in our redeemed life? Like, are we walking as redeemed believers that we are? And are we leading through that?
Hi friends, I'm Caine, and you're listening to the Life and Leadership Podcast, where we share conversations with faith-fueled leaders from all over the globe.
God, I have so much to be thankful for, and even in the midst of my suffering, you are present.
I feel like the next generation are rising and choosing consecration, not deconstruction.
I'm an ambassador. I'm representing another kingdom.
Now, my prayer is that our time together each week activates you to fulfill your God-given purpose and to follow Jesus wholeheartedly as you lead within your particular sphere of influence. Hi friends, before we dive into today's episode, I want to encourage you to click into the show notes to access the discussion guide. These guides are designed not only for personal growth, but also for growing together with your team or your small group. Now, I'm so fired up today because we're hearing from my very good friend and the Vice President of Collaborative Partnerships at OneHope, Jenn Brown. Now, I know you're going to love her, so let's dive in. Hey, Jenn, I am so pumped that you are with me today, and you did this at such short notice. You are like the best, most flexible person in the world. Now, you know I have fallen in love with you, and I want everyone to know a little bit about what you're doing because you are one of the most dynamic leaders I know. So tell us a little bit about your story, how you've ended up where you've ended up at OneHope.
Oh, Caine, I'm so happy to have this conversation, but yeah, I started at OneHope 10 years ago. This year is 10 years, and OneHope is such an incredible organization. We work to serve and reach children and youth all around the world. We started in 1987, and over that amount of time, we've seen over 2 billion children and youth reached with God's word. And I have the opportunity. Honestly, I have one of the best jobs in the world. I serve as our Vice President of Collaborative Partnerships and do all of our strategy with our relationships around the world and building kingdom collaborations in dynamic ways. And so it's just a fun job to be able to serve the kingdom in this way.
I love that. How did you end up there, though? What was your background before that? Like, how does one have a qualification to be kingdom collaborator of partnerships?
Right. I think the short answer is you don't, right? You kind of just stumble into it. You stumble into it by God's divine orchestration. Honestly, my background is in ancient Near East cultures and languages. So I was super nerdy in university and loved it. I went into ancient languages and really just wanted to understand the context, the culture, and the language that was the Old Testament. And so I began to study that with everything in me. And then I moved to Israel, studied in Israel and Palestine, studied at Hebrew University of Jerusalem. I worked and lived there a couple of years after my degree. And honestly, it was one of the most incredible opportunities to study strategy and entrepreneurship and innovation in Israel, one of the startup nations of the world. And so there was never in my mind a plan where there would be a position, a role, an organization that would make sense of those two domains. But I tell you what, the Lord loves to make connections. And if we're willing to recognize patterns and how he's moving, how he's orchestrating, the answer is always yes to how he's leading and guiding us. So I said yes to OneHope, and my life went like this, took a totally different turn than I ever imagined. And I haven't looked back since.
I love so much about what you're saying. Oh man, I could riff off this, but I know where I want to go about the Lord having patterns and rhythms. And so often, so much of the leadership literature is all sort of about moving up and to the right. And, you know, there's a kind of a path to a career or a path to a position. But I think almost bar none, anybody that I know that's doing anything significant in terms of kingdom impact has definitely not had a linear career path. Like it's, you
right.
know, how are you
Absolutely.
going to associate studying in Israel and doing ancient languages to what you're doing today? Like if you look at it naturally, you go, there is no way that is going to, X is going to lead to Y to Z. And so, you know, you see patterns where other people don't see patterns. And I love that about you. So you're kind of really helping me. You're like one of my teachers in this season of our growth as we look at so much of what we're doing with Propel. But tell me, where did your interest with women, leadership, and seeing patterns, historical and prophetically future patterns of women's leadership development, how did you even get interested in that, and how have you sort of started to dive deeply into those things?
I love it. To be honest, it started with a desire and a knowing that I'd been called as a leader. And you can't separate my leadership from me being female, right? You can't separate those two. So how do I bring the best of who I am, the best of who God has called me to be in a very unique and special way to leadership? And as I dove more into the study of leadership, as I dove more into becoming really reflective of who I am as a leader, how the Lord was uniquely gifting me, I began to realize that there's so many attributes and qualities of females that's incredibly important for this time and season that the Lord has the church in around the world. And so when I think about women in leadership, there are two emerging global trends that I've really paid attention to over the last couple of years that have helped guide and shape myself. And I've just now entered into a space where I'm formally researching that to be able to bring some of these trends into practical insight and learning for women, really to help them step more fully into their God-given calling as an equal participant in the mission of God. That's what we want, right?
Beautiful.
We want to see women fully released, fully equipped, and empowered to step into the mission of God just as they've been uniquely created and orchestrated by the Lord.
So, of course, everyone listening to this is, what are the trends? Okay, you cannot say, I'm
so
seeing two trends. Yes.
So the two trends are this. So we know if we were to take a look at society right now, we know that society is moving into a decentralized state, meaning when we look at governments, when we look at social impact, when we look even at the church, we see the church moving into more decentralized structures. Think of denominations, think of megachurches that have risen, right? And now they're moving into multi-sites. And it's not that decentralization leads to isolation. That's the temptation, right? Is that as you decentralize, you become more isolated or less connected. And that's not the case. So decentralization of our society is becoming more and more relevant. But the unique thing about decentralization is that it requires more collaboration and more connectivity. To do a decentralized system well, you have to be more collaborative. So that's one trend that I'm paying attention to. The other trend is the future of leadership. So the progression of leadership over the last couple of decades has been, if I could use a simple analogy of leadership in the industrial age, was really motivated by muscle, right? Whoever had the power, it was put your hand to the plow. It was like put your hand in the machine, and that's how you did leadership. But then it's progressed to the brain, right? We're in a knowledge economy. We're all knowledge workers. We're working with our mind more so than with the muscle of our hands. But right now we're in this quasi state where we're transitioning into an era where we're going to be leading out with our heart.
Yeah.
And leadership based on the heart really leads out with empathy, with courage, with vulnerability, and with more connection. And so when you've got these two global trends happening on all sectors, in all sectors around the world and in all societies, I think what it does for us is it creates an entirely new environment that leads to a new era of collaboration where women can step into, where they can bring the best of who they are. So decentralization requires good connection, good collaboration. We know by research that women are more collaborative. They're more consensus building. They're more about connection and building coalitions with their teammates. They work horizontally, right? Women are oriented that way. And that's what you need to run and live and exist in a decentralized structure or system. And then with the rise of heart leadership, we know by research that women are just naturally more empathetic. We lead out from a place of vulnerability more comfortably than men do. And so I think these two things are priming a new environment for us to really step into this new era of collaboration towards the mission of God. And so what I would say to every woman listening, and why this excites me, is that this is an opportunity for women to show up with their strengths. Show up with what makes you uniquely you, because the world in which we're living is always shifting and changing. And I'm excited because the world in which we're going to be living in the next couple of decades is actually going to need stronger female leadership than quite possibly ever before. And the church and the kingdom needs every single woman fully empowered, fully equipped to step into that calling and in their own sphere of influence.
I'm totally with you. And I'm just looking at an outflow of even my own life and leadership over the last nearly 4 decades. But even when we started A21, I'm like, I'm not doing this by myself. And so, like here we go. Like
absolutely,
the instant thought is, how are we going to mobilize people around the globe to be part of this movement and, to become abolitionists within their own sphere of influence? And to me, there was no disconnect between a stay-at-home mum, potentially homeschooling 5 kids. She could be as involved as a single entrepreneur, or corporate CEO. Somehow, I do think that we're wired up to have a capacity to go, everybody can be mobilized within their sphere of influence, with their gift mix, their talents, whatever it might be. We don't see those things as limitations, like you can't be involved because of ABC. We're like, how can you be involved because of ABC, because of what you're doing?
Exactly.
It's just a whole different way of looking, which is awesome. Now, I'm sure you're not saying, because I'm thinking as you're talking, and I am tracking with you as I see things globally. Obviously, I've taken on the role of E21, the Global Women's Alliance for the Empowered 21 Network, precisely for the reasons you're talking about, that I think there's such shifts in culture and in the church world where you have to see God's moving and making a way for more and more women to step up and into their purpose. And of course, both the leader, pastoral side of me is like that we are not saying in that that women are inherently better than, less sinful than, or more capable than men, because I'm going, well, in the same way that there's heart leadership, the scripture also says the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it?
Absolutely.
That, out of the heart comes every evil thing, it's actually quite shocking what comes out of the human heart. So when we're talking about heart-led leadership, that's not just a feminine thing, it's leadership, period. And I think a lot of the shaking has been revealing to us all, male or female, we got to look at the condition of our heart, because so much of the toxicity, so much of the negativity, the narcissism, all the things have come out of hearts that are not right. And a woman is as prone to that as a man. I guess, people are like, Christine, why do you say this? I go, because I remember even when I started Propel, I'm like, the answer is not like, okay, let's kick all of the sort of toxic, narcissistic, ego-driven males out of the corner office and just replace it with women that are full of greed and envy and lust. That is not going to help anyone. Like, sin is genderless. It's just genderless. But and we can learn from a lot of things. But so what do you see as women are going to be stepping more and more into places of leadership and prominence? Because we don't have a whole history of being in those places, we're still as vulnerable to either making mistakes or what do you see? What could be some of the vulnerabilities in the future? I'm tracking more there, and I know I'm just talking to you on the fly, but in some of my very close friends where I'm talking and I'm going, okay, I've been in this space for 35 years. It's, of course, been very male-dominated, and I've learned how to survive in all of this and thrive. And as the world's changing, I am not convinced that replacing or saying leadership from one gender just needs to be replaced by another gender is going to solve anything. That's not where the conversation is. That's a starting point. Yes, let's remove barriers to people being empowered to step into leadership. But at the end of the day, all of us still have to deal with our own stuff in order to lead like Christ. Like, I'm throwing a very big sort of thing at you and going, what could be potential pitfalls in the same way that you're really excited about what the trends are showing?
Yeah, no, I love this question. And you're absolutely right. Like, I have to affirm what you're saying. that this isn't a replacement of, this is Acts 4. It is the picture of the first church having all things in common. It's John 17. It's the Lord praying that we would be one, right? So it's not 1 minus 1. It's all of us together working towards the mission of God. But to your question about what are some of the things that, what are some of the vulnerabilities that we may experience, right?
Yeah.
I love Henry Nouwen's take on the 3 temptations that Christ faced in the wilderness. And what he does is he takes those temptations and he gives us a picture of what those modern temptations could look like for someone in ministry. And so those 3 temptations are, it's the temptation to be relevant, it's the temptation to be spectacular, and it's the temptation to be powerful. And all of us, in whatever season, whatever role, whatever sphere of influence, we're constantly faced with those temptations. And Satan would want nothing more than for us to grab at one of those, right? The temptation to be relevant. Now, I face this almost every day, right? Because I'm in a situation right now where I see wardrobe trends changing drastically. And I don't want to get left behind wearing skinny jeans, Christine. Like, I see the younger generations wearing wider leg jeans, and here I am still in skinny jeans. That's a temptation to stay relevant. That's one thing I just have to do, right? But
my daughter would say you have to do that. My daughter would go,
I have to do it.
You have to, that's it.
That's not a temptation. That's an
not
expectation.
Relevant. That's exactly right.
So there's the temptation to be relevant, though, that we would be the smartest person, right? The wittiest person. Like, there's always this human drive to be relevant and stay relevant. The temptation to be spectacular, to do the next big thing, to do that thing that will finally bring the recognition or admonition that our heart just desperately is looking for, right? And then the temptation to be powerful, to get to that corner office, to get to that title or that role that's finally gonna put at ease all of those aches that we have in our hearts. So Henry Nouwen talks about this, and he says, this is what modern ministry faces. And his solution to it is through the lens of vulnerability, and I love it. And he says, the true vocation of modern ministry is to stand before the world completely irrelevant, but through a healed and redeemed vulnerable self, right? Wow. So I think the challenge to all of us, regardless of gender, is to say, are we walking in our redeemed life? Like, are we walking as redeemed believers that we are? And are we leading through that? And are we willing to stand in our vulnerability and say, it literally has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with who he is and who he's made me to be. And that's the lens and the frame in which we can and should be looking at leadership.
At Trevecca Nazarene University, leadership is more than a skill, it's a calling. The School of Leadership and Interdisciplinary Studies offers cutting-edge programs at the bachelor's, master's, and doctoral levels, all designed to prepare you for a career that impacts your world. In any of the leadership degree programs at Trevecca, you'll be guided by experienced faculty as you build expertise that can prepare you for promotions and new career opportunities. You'll get to know a supportive cohort of classmates who understands you and are working towards similar goals. Best of all, you'll take flexible online classes so you can continue working and prioritizing the things in your life that matter most. Academic excellence is at the heart of Trevecca's mission to educate and equip leaders. That dedication has been recognized by Fortune Education, naming Trevecca's Doctor of Education in Leadership the most affordable online doctorate in education 2024. No matter your field, Trevecca's leadership programs equip you to lead with integrity, creativity, and purpose. Visit trevecca.edu/Christine to get started today.
So we're living in a world where there is, whether it's genuine or supposed, like vulnerability, transparency, authenticity, they're kind of like the buzzwords. And, there's so much on social media about, well, I'm just being vulnerable, I'm just being transparent, and yet in some cases, you can see that, wow, you're not healed. Like, you're using this as a kind of healing place. How do you differentiate between authentic vulnerability and transparency? What does that mean in leadership? And I don't know, healing in real time with people. Like, where is the line? Because almost in our world, what is being applauded and touted as, man, that is just so vulnerable. They're just so authentic. They're just so real. And I'm like, I think you probably should be in a closet with your therapist and talking about that stuff, not on here. I don't know, where is that line? And as a leader, how much do you work through? I've got a few hundred staff around the world. Like, am I not being authentic if I'm not every moment telling them everything that's going through my mind, or with Nick, or I don't know, where is that line? In an age of vulnerability,
yeah.
I mean, has that term been hijacked? Has it been redefined? I'm not sure, because I look at things, I go, I'm not sure that that's vulnerable. Or probably I think you're saying too much. I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah.
Because you're part of that generation that is like, put it all out there. So I'm just not sure.
Well, and I think you're absolutely right. And that's where I was going to go with it, is for the first time ever, my generation and younger have had the opportunity to instantly publish what they're processing. And so in an age where we have so much knowledge, we're desperate for wisdom. And so I think it comes down to having wisdom to discern. I think it's really the role of discernment, right? Discerning what level of authenticity leads to fruit in others, right? Like, that's what we want. Ultimately, the success of my life is determined in the fruit that the Lord produces in and through me. And I want to see that in the lives of my team. So the way that I've led and really created an environment for my team is I'm always going to lead with honesty. You can count on me to be honest. And I want them to live and work in an environment where they can be honest themselves, right? That they can lead out with trust, and they can build that with themselves and with others, but they can be honest. Now, honesty requires discernment. And I lean very heavily on accountability structures in my life and through our team. And I think sometimes we downplay accountability in this generation, right? We overplay our ability to trust ourselves, our ability, because we're through the lens of vulnerability. We're out there. People see us. People know us. We think that in some way we don't need as much accountability. But I would say the more visible you are, I mean, it's just a non-negotiable in this day and age. You have to have accountability structures. You have to have those relationships that are going to hold you accountable. And not only that, but you have to have those relationships where you can specifically go to and process certain things with. It's not for everyone. It's maybe just for a few, and you need to have those spaces. Every leader needs to have those spaces. So I think it's just leading out with discernment and having a commitment of honesty, but not everything is for everyone.
Tell me, when we, again, the language of accountability and accountability structures, well, some of the most sort of public blow-ups we've seen are people that would have said, I'm really accountable. That word is even like, so what does that practically look like for you when you're saying, even within your team, in your leadership, so personally and then also organizationally, how have you guys set up accountability structures? What does it look like? And is it still possible to circumvent accountability structures and do whatever you want to do anyway?
Yeah. So I will say this. You can have the most strategic, most well thought through accountability structure and system in your life. And you have it on the checklist. Boom, boom, boom. I've got all of these things in place. And you choose not to listen to or submit to that accountability structure or system. That's not accountability. So I think sometimes there's the illusion of accountability, right?
Yes.
We have these structures, check, right? But if we're not willing to, when someone says no, to submit and to honor that no, and to trust that in the counsel of many, there's wisdom, it's really not true accountability. And so I would say I've learned a ton from Rob Hoskins, our president, and he leads with such integrity and with such accountability. He has multiple structures of accountability above him, peer level, below him, people who can speak up into his life. But he also has a care committee, and I love this concept. I wish more and more leaders had this. Is he has designated individuals from different spheres of his life where they come and they meet quarterly, and they together have conversations about opportunities that are coming his way, directions for OneHope, travel engagements for him and his wife, like speaking engagements. All of that is covered and talked about frequently in a care committee. And so I think, having those structures, there's so many good resources online for women to find where you can bring that into your life. But I would say having those structures is one thing, but having a heart willing to submit when they say something that you don't want to hear, that's accountability. That's the crux of accountability.
I love this because you are just full on in life. You're single. Now, when I was your age, how old are you now?
Oh, you're going to make me say my age.
Yeah, I'm going to say it right here. I'm 58. I'm telling you, I'm 58. So you're going to be a lot younger than that. What are you?
I'm 36.
That's beautiful. Okay. So when in today's time, so when I was young, I married at 30. I had my first child at your age now. My second child, 40. I was almost 40 when I had Catherine. And she's like now a senior at college, so that must make you feel very young. Okay, so that's how I've got all that. But it was unusual, and particularly in the faith space, to be a single woman doing what I was doing at the time. And I was like a youth evangelist for our denomination, and to this day, I mean, that was in 1990 something, and now it's 2024, and I still am the only woman ever in the history of that denomination that was a woman that was in that kind of level of leadership. But I remember in those days it was like, oh, how can you do this? You're single. Like, I don't know, as if somehow my singleness was thwarted the gift that God gave me. I don't know, like somehow it was like, okay, I'm not quite sure. People are still getting saved and it's all still happening. But and then the question, like even before I was promoted, it was like, well, what happens when you get married? Now, the assumption was I was going to. At that point, I wasn't planning to. Like it wasn't even in my thinking. But it was like, and I just remember, like it hadn't occurred to me. Like I will just keep doing what God's called me to do. Like it's like I didn't think that God would call me to get married to thwart the purpose of God, or that God would give us children to thwart the purpose of God. It would be enhancing. If that was the next thing, that would be the next thing. We're living in a really different time in 2024 than when I started in 1989 in ministry, with everything to do with marriage, family, gender, sexuality. The world has really changed. I'm just wondering, because most people listening to this and watching would pretty much you would be very average and the above average demographic of who would be tapped into this. Does that even occur to you guys at all? Like marriage, singleness, do you find any barriers? I mean, I don't know. Tell me what it's like. Because it was very different. I'm assuming it was different, and maybe it wasn't in my day than what it might be for you.
Yeah, that's such a great question. I would say, in my individual journey, my experience in the ministry world is where I've probably experienced more questions about my singleness than in maybe a secular context. So I think there's something about the church that really, really says, married couples versus single. I don't know quite yet what really drives that. I think maybe it's probably just representation, but I am convinced that the Lord wants to use me, no matter of my relationship status. Now, does that create some additional considerations for how I navigate and work with, which I predominantly work with men who are married and in my day-to-day and, when I travel. And so, yeah, there are some considerations that I have to take, and we put in place different things like that. But it's never stopped me. It's forced me to be a little bit more creative. And it's never been something that I've said, I'm going to wait till I'm married, or I'm going to wait till I have a family to step into my God-given calling. And it's interesting because I truly believe that at the intersection of maybe some of our greatest pain, maybe some of our greatest desires that have gone unmet, or maybe even some of our greatest disappointments, that intersection is actually oftentimes the foundation where the Lord builds your greatest ministry.
Totally.
And I've seen him do it time and time again in my life, right? Where actually, due to my singleness, I've been able to step into opportunities that maybe some of my, peers who are married because of obligations and family, which are all wonderful and everything that I would desire one day, right? But because the season that the Lord has me in, I'm able to say yes. And I've seen him move, and he's allowed me to have a voice into that space with other women. And I've seen him use that intersection of just some of the greatest questions that I have of the Lord and with the Lord. He's used it to be a foundation in a unique way for ministry.
See, I love that. And I remember, I was known at college as the president of the Singles Till Rapture Club, because I thought I was going to be I thought, man, I'm doing more single than most married people that I know, this back in the 90s.
Right.
And Nick, if he was here, he'd be saying to you, it was just so unromantic with Christine, because when I asked her to marry me, she's like, give me a good reason on how I would be more fruitful for the kingdom married than I would single. And, she just looked at me like it was, I'm like, well, honey, this is what you're signing up for. So it's, at the end of the day, of course, did I love him? Yes. All the sort of natural things. That's a given. But that wasn't enough for me to get married. That was my thing. It was like, yes. Do I love you? Yes. Would I love the companionship? Yes. Do I love that? But I had to know that this was part of purpose. So here we are now at 58. My youngest has just gone to college in Paris, and, Catherine's at Pepperdine, a senior. And for Nick and I, we're just doing what we've always done. It's like we married for purpose. We had kids for purpose. The mission of God continued, the purpose of the calling. So it's not like we're looking at each other now going, oh man, I don't know you, and we're empty nesters. And we're like, we're still running. The kids are like, do I still need to book to come and see you? I'm like, yes, because I think what has kept us passionate, what has kept us even really interested in each other still, is the fact that we're aligned around the greater mission and purpose of God primarily, and all the other things have kind of fallen into place with that. So I always love to say to single women, because, in my day, to be 30 and single, it was in your day, this is like normal people. Why are you even thinking about it before 40? It was not. And to be Greek and single, it was like my mother was weeping and gnashing her teeth, and just by the time I'm the first one in my family that married a non-Greek, and by that point my mum was like, anyone, just male, just get her married, please take my daughter, here's 2 cucumbers and a tomato, please, just it was, but so, because just your purpose in those days, you could not fulfill what God wanted if you weren't married. And I want to say, are you kidding me? We're all called. So you, to me, are just such a wonderful example of a young woman. I've gotten to know you better and better over time. It's not even a thought. You and I have personally not even had this conversation. So it's just like, you're just all about the mission. I'm like, I want what God's doing with you. So as we wrap up, because we could talk for the next 3 hours. So I'm going to wrap up, and you are coming on again whether you like it or not. But I just maybe just want you to speak just one final thing about what are you most excited about in this hour we live in, where there's such a focus globally on so much negativity, politically, economically, morally, sociologically. The world has lost its ever-loving mind. It doesn't matter where you are. You and I were just in Asia together. We're it's just, the world has lost its mind. But where are you seeing hope? And what, for women, where particularly in these really volatile times to do with gender identity, and even, I was watching a particular campaign last night, and it just, again, up over on the air is, what is a woman? I'm like, in 2024, we're just asking that question. Okay, so that's the world we live in. So where are you? What's your hope as a young woman in your 30s? Kind of, are you confident for the future of women and women in leadership? Like, how do you feel?
I couldn't be more confident and more hopeful for women in the future. Like I said, I truly believe that those two trends are creating an environment for a new era of female leadership. Awesome. This is, and like you said, it's not at the expense of men or the subtraction of men. It is joint partnership as equal participants towards the mission of God. And if we can lean into our strengths as women, if we can trust that the Lord has uniquely created each of us towards collaboration, towards connection, and leading from a place of courage and strength and empathy, not just for our teams, but on behalf of the world and for the world, I think it's all the ingredients for the Lord to do something so incredible and in a way that maybe we've not yet seen. And that gives me so much hope. And I hope that every single woman listening to this feels that they're a part of something so much greater, and that the kingdom is on the move and we get to participate in it. And I'm just so thankful for your voice, Christine, and advocating and paving the way. Thank you for paving the way for single women like myself, having a calling in a ministry in their 30s.
I love that so much. All right, my friend, I love you dearly. And I'm just letting you know in advance, you're going to be back on.
Can't wait. I cannot wait.
I love this conversation so very much. Now, Jenn's details are listed and tagged in the description of this episode so you can keep up with her and connect further. And to you, our podcast listeners, I love you so much and I appreciate every one of you. So thank you for joining us right here on the Life and Leadership Podcast. I'll see you back here next week.
A special thanks to Trevecca Nazarene University's School of Leadership and Interdisciplinary Studies for sponsoring our podcast. Find your calling and advance your career with a degree that brings your future into focus. Learn more at trevecca.edu/Christine.
Access more